Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at the TKS75 by Kevin Langlois. You can take your whoop, such as a Newbie Drone Hummingbird or a Happy Model Mobula, and turn it into a nice little outside flyer. In my case, I'm running Zing 0802 22,000 kV motors with 40mm Newbie Drone AZ props. And the board is the all-in-one board, it's the Crazy Bee Lite from Happy Model. And I flew it exclusively on these Newbie Drone Nitro Nectar 300 mAh 1S batteries. Yep, and I'm still running PH20 on it. The frame weighs 3.9 grams. With it built up, it weighs 23.25 grams. With the battery, it weighs just about 31.5 grams. This version is a print, and it's printed out of TPU, so it does flex, and it should be very durable. So if you're a basher, the print version is probably what I would recommend. So as we sit here on the table, you can probably tell there's very, very little wind. Weather report says 8 miles an hour, and by the feel of my skin, I'd say that's fairly accurate. So this is a pretty straight swap, no soldering, no real need. So if you've got a Mobula or a B-Brain brushless from Newbie Drone or some other whoop that you want to swap over, it could be done quite easily. And then in this particular case, if you're wanting to do the same thing that I've done here, I'm running Emu Flight, so you'll need to look in your Betaflight log up at the top, the little black section. You may have to click Show Log. When you connect, it should give you the target, and with that target, you flash the same target in Emu Flight, and then you select the Connor Hubbard or Freestyle 1S. He's got a couple different presets in there, and presets aren't going to be perfect. They're a starting point. So I'm flying the exact preset that Connor set up right here. So mine is very, very similar. I'm certain that Connor's might have different motors. He might be running different props. He might have used a different canopy. So don't expect it to be perfect. This is a starting point that'll get you to what I would say is very good flight. I would say in my particular case, I probably need to drop D somewhere between 5 and 10 points. You'll see in some of the harder turns, the D, we get a little bit of shudder. But I didn't want to tweak the tune out and then you to have different expectations of what you would get. So I want that to be super clear. But these things are a lot of fun. I've really grown to enjoy the Super Micro 1S flight. You know, we've done a couple of Super Micros. One of them was 2S and then in the gnarly subatomic. But these 1S, I think a lot of people really like because the batteries are dirt cheap. You've probably got handfuls of them already. And you've probably got one or more whoops, so you can just take one of them and transition them onto this frame. And that's where Kevin's frame, the TKS75, comes in. It's a straight transition. You can pretty much use anything you want. You may have to come up with a canopy. If you go over to Jack's 3D Printing, you'll find that he has a kit version with the canopy, or you can just buy the frame itself. There's also carbon there, and I would say as far as the carbon version goes, there has been some form of testing. I really don't know how much. I wouldn't want to claim that I know how much. I've done some testing, but only on the 1.5mm size, and I broke that. And so it's been switched to a 2mm size. So you are kind of part of that testing group if you go with the carbon. And I'm actually testing it on 2S, and I'll show you that back on the desk. But this is the print version. Of course, it's available on Thingiverse as well. I'll have links to Jack's 3D Printing as well as Thingiverse. The print file down in the video description down below. And you see where we come into land. I could have flown probably 3 or 4 more seconds, maybe even 5, 3.6 volts per cell. So on a dare, Kevin posted on Facebook that he would pay me in beers if I flew this inside. And I think you can see where the D's too high more inside than you can outside. So that's something you'll see as well. So I gave it a shot. Actually, this is my second or third shot. My first shot, I had run out of props. The Zing motors, the shafts seem to be just a touch smaller than others. I found that the Aziz props stuck better on, say, Happy Model motors or something like that. The Zing motors seem to be a touch smaller. So every time I would bump something inside and out, I would pretty much lose a prop. So I ended up down a prop, but I did find some more props, so I gave it another go. I found some blue props. I can't believe I didn't know exactly where those were. And this is my attempt inside. I didn't fly it a lot inside, but basically because I'd been guilted into giving it a try, went ahead and tried it a little bit. And I didn't have any damage in the house. Every time I bumped something, I would then try to go through the DVR and then check to where I might have bumped, looking for scratches or nicks that my wife might see, and then she might holler at me. But thankfully, between probably the loose fit of the props on those Zing motors and the fact that it's really lightweight and I'm not going plaid as I normally might with a whoop, I didn't damage anything. No cuts in any furniture. I didn't tear up any blankets or towels or anything. Just a few bumps here and there. I'm going to get stuck underneath the couch here eventually as you watch me bump around. I don't know how much of this we should watch. I think I've proven Kevin owes me a few beers, right? I don't really drink, and I don't expect any sort of payment or anything like that. I always think it's fun to test something out. And when people ever ask me to test something, whether it's an individual or a company, I do try to. Sometimes I kind of have to temper my own excitement because I get overloaded. I accept too many things, and then I feel like I don't do a very good job using my time effectively for any one thing. So sometimes I do have to kind of put things on the back burner. But these super micros that Kevin has, I'm pretty excited about them. And if you can't feel my excitement, hopefully the words help clarify that I really like them. I'm especially pumped about the 2S version I've been working on. So if we can get the 2mm carbon to work on 2S, and for it to be fairly durable, I expect everything to eventually break. You crash in the right way, everything breaks. But I sure hope that I can make it at least reasonably durable. If it makes it, say, 60 or 70 flights on a $12 frame, I'm pretty happy with that. So I might call that good. Of course, some of you might have different opinions. At this point, I've lost a prop, and I don't have any more good-fitting props, so I have to scrap the inside flight. So a couple of things about these and protecting your motor shafts. Of course, if you're running 0802 or other smaller motors that have 1mm motor shafts, you're going to be concerned. So if I take off one of these, and hopefully I can get my camera to focus, the Zing motors do something fairly interesting here where you can get your prop all the way down to the bell. And down to the bell is important to make sure that you don't have a lot of leverage with your prop up high on the motor stem. So when you crash, it has a less tendency to break. On other motors, you'll find a C-clip or something that's down there, and you may have troubles. You can see as I put this prop back on, prop goes down nice and tight down to the bell of the motor. Let me grab another prop here. Hopefully you can make that out. If you have a prop that you can't get down or a motor that doesn't allow your prop to get all the way down, what I've done here is I've just taken a little drill bit. I just grabbed one out of my drill bit kit, and I just gave it a few turns, and see how it kind of mushrooms out that center bit of the hub. You can do this with other props too, but that gives you a little bit of a void to get that C-clip that's on top of a lot of other micro motors to get, so you can get the prop hub all the way down to the motor bell, because that helps protect your motor shaft, especially when flying them without prop protection. Another thing that helps you protect your motor shafts is using lighter props that are flexible and will tend to bend rather than being stiff and rigid. The Gem Fan props, for one, are good props, but they're very, very stiff. So my concern is that if you put Gem Fan props on this, you may find you're running through motor shafts because they are so stiff. These Z props tend to bend. I think the HQ props tend to bend as well. So that bending helps to take some of the impact and not transfer it down to your motor shaft. So that's a good thing. So as far as the building goes, it's pretty straightforward. The little tips that I can give you, I did fly this on super low kV motors, on 17,500 kV motors from Beta FPV, and I got a solid 3-minute flight on the same batteries. And then when I went up to a 450, I got nearly 6 minutes. But of course, when your KV's that low, it's a much different sort of flight. It's more exploratory cruisy. You could still do tricks, but you've just got to use all your throttle to gain some altitude before you do your trick or your maneuver. So, and you can use larger motors on this, like 1102 or 1103, but you lose the motor protection that you have built in. Hopefully that's discernible. That sticks out a little bit further. It's not pointed like we see in some frames, like some of the other frames that Kevin's designed. I don't know if you'll see this one or not, but again, this is 1.5mm. This one's a lot of fun too. And you probably saw that, but you can run 2-inch props on that, but I don't recommend 2-inch props unless you're going to a larger motor. On 1102, say the Beta FPV 1102, that I think it's 18,500 kV. I have a few of those. Those are pretty hard to get. So if you're planning on doing a build that's 1S with 1102 motors, I would definitely jump on buying some 1102 18,500 kV Beta FPV motors. I'll put a link down in the video description. I think it was Get FP was one of the last vendors I saw with those motors. But the motor bell comes right out to the edge, so you essentially have no motor bell protection on the 1102 motors, just because of their wide stator size. As far as putting this together, there really isn't a lot to it. I started going down that path before I got sidetracked. One of the things that I would recommend you doing, is the holes for your screws for mounting your board as well as your canopy. Those can be very, very tight. So you probably want to get those at least started first. And I recommend that because then you can lay this flat on the ground. Like say I've got a spare frame here. You can lay this flat on the ground and you can get your screw lined up and you can press down super hard to get it start threaded. So you can really bear it down because it's all flat. If you put your components on there like your board and then you're trying to attach your canopy and you don't have your screws for mounting in there, that's going to present a challenge. So I recommend getting those screws started first. As far as the motor screws, these slots in here are nice and tight. You can finger push them in there or you can use a screwdriver. Just get them started. Just kind of shove them through that hole a little bit. See how it's got a slat? Shove them through there and they'll hold the screws in place, and then you can bring your motor down to it and finish the screwing. The nice thing about them being so tight is that you shouldn't have to be concerned about screws coming loose from vibration, because that TPU, that print, is holding on to it, so that it shouldn't vibrate loose. At least in my case, as proof of concept, I still have all my screws. And I've flown this thing so much I ran out of props. I have some more props on order, by the way, too. So one of the advantages that we get in the flight is the fact that this design is different. Instead of a traditional arm, we have this void where the prop tends to blow more thrust down through, and you can feel that when you're flying. I think that's an important thing to separate, say, from something like the Mosquito. We just did the Mosquito from Newbie Drone, which is just a flat piece of carbon that's kind of traditional shaped for the most part. This flies differently. I feel like this is more aggressive than the Mosquito because it does have that extra little bit of thrust. And instead of blowing down on the straight arm carbon, it's just going right through here. You know, there's a little bit of an edge to these bits, but for the most part, it's going right down through there. So I think Kevin's design here has got that advantage. The disadvantage of this design is you've got all these holes, so if you go into a tree or bush, every little branch can possibly get in there, and if it gets in one of those little tiny ones, that may present a special sort of challenge in getting that sucker back out. But you know, you got to pick your poison somewhere. You can go with a design like this that may get yeah. It feels like whenever I get hung up in bushes a lot. I've got a couple of bushes that I've flown around in the front and backyards that thankfully aren't that high. I can get a ladder if I absolutely need to. When I get into a bush, I feel like this design catches the bushes a lot more. It could be a false positive. Maybe I'm just flying more aggressively, and that's why I'm going into the bush more. But it feels like in quads in general, regardless of design, we're flying almost grappling hooks whenever we get close to a tree. But I have to put that out there because that is something that I found with this, and like others like the Diatone Cube that have a little bit more of a square shape. They tend to grab tree limbs and bushes and stuff like that. They have these voids that they can go in. Kevin's also got a canopy that he's designed, so if you buy the kit from Jack's 3D Printing, you can get the canopy that he's designed. He's got another designed canopy. I think it's up on Thingiverse, and I've got a terrible print I'm going to show you. This is my print, just to give you a look at the design and see what you think. You see, my prints are not all that good. I just really haven't spent a lot of time learning about printing. I'm kind of a hack, just kind of get it done sort of printing. And you can see probably one of the key things here is he's got these thin feet, and it's kind of angled back off those edges right away. Because if you do run 2-inch props, this is my 2S version. This is the one I was telling you about in the flight video. I haven't flown it yet. I just transitioned this over to the 2mm version last night. But as you can see here, I had to trim my canopy down, to get clearance, especially here at the front, to get the clearance that I needed. And I've also got a Baby Ratel 2 in there. So I thought it'd be super fun to have a little 2S flyer like this that is really all props and have a nice camera in it as well. I did have the weight penalty of this camera, which is about 2¼ grams more than the Runcam Nano 3. Something to consider. But this is, if you go the carbon route and you go the bigger motor route, consider yourself part of the test group. That is not a proven formula just as of yet. Right now, I think it's safest to run 0802 motors, even if you get the carbon version. And I wouldn't run 2-inch propellers on this just yet until we get more people testing it and crushing it. If you want to be part of that group, I sure would encourage you, but encourage you knowing that you may break a prop or you may have odd results of some sort. It could be that the arms might need to be bulked up or something. You know, this as far as 2S goes, this is something I wanted to do. This isn't what Kevin designed it for. So you can find these if you want to go the carbon route on Jack's 3D printing as well. And just as a sneak peek, I do have 2.5mm versions that I asked Jack to cut me. I did pay for all the frames. It's something that I do from the channel. Whatever revenue the channel creates, I buy stuff that supports FPV shops and designers and printers and carbon cutters. I don't stick my hand out and ask for free stuff. Well, that's just not my style. It always makes me feel very guilty taking essentially money out of someone else's mouth. Not why I do this stuff. I don't want free stuff. I just want to have fun. And these are a lot of fun. And of course, you can print your own. There's a Thingiverse link down in the video description. You can get the carbon version or a print version from Jack's 3D Printing. I've said that several times. And you could then, I guess if you don't have a printer, you could download the file and send it to someone who does have a printer, maybe a local school, maybe a library, maybe you have a printing service that you like to use otherwise. You know, it's I would encourage you to give it a try. Oh, one more thing before we go. One little tip. Let me grab a battery. I need a bigger battery. Here we go. So when I'm running the typical single cell, what I would do, I didn't want to modify the lead. I didn't want to make it longer. That's just another step. And so I push it forward. Oftentimes we want a little bit of forward battery bias anyways, and then I can plug it in real easy. But if I want to run a bigger battery, which you can do, and you get about, depending upon your flight style, you can get a minute or more, maybe even a flight time going to a 450. So then I put it in the opposite way, and you can probably see I've got a little bit of UMA grip on here, the triangles. Well, then you look at this and you're like, that doesn't work. Well, you just pop it in through one of these voids, your lead side. Now it will. Plugs right in. And then once I usually get them plugged in, I shove the battery forward a little bit. Maybe not that far. A little bit. And just to kind of put the battery with a little bit of that forward bias. I tend to fly forward. Some people might tend to fly backwards some. So you might want it centered. That's just what I do. But you can get more flight time. You can feel the weight though. But if you're doing exploratory or training or cruisy sort of flying and you want that extra flight time, 450 is an option. I did not go up to a 520. And I think you might even, if you're doing that same sort of exploratory cruisy flying, if you're flying the 2-inch props on an 1102 motor, I think it's going to have to be beta FPV motors. I don't think Happy Model motors go with KV above, say, 12,000. So if you've got those 18,500 motors, I think you'll even get more flight time. Just larger props, you know, it's going to be a little bit more efficient because you're not changing prop speed all that much because you're doing smooth cruising sort of flight. So there are a lot of different options. I think I've gone on way too long, probably longer than any of you intended to listen. As far as the weight goes of this one, I could have brought the weight down by using shorter screws. You could go with, well, not with this Canopy. I don't think you can do nylon screws with this Canopy. You might be able to do nylon screws with a print Canopy that has holes that you can just shove them through, and that would save you a little bit of weight. But there's not too much weight to save in the way I've assembled it. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the comment section below. I appreciate your time. There's going to be more on these yet, too, if you're wondering. Thanks for watching.